Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. Or good 3 minutes till noon. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to say a quick thank you to Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos for being on the call, as well as Senator Wellman. We are still waiting for a few other folks. Currently, we have about 69 people on the Zoom call. We had 300 people sign up. So we're going to give everyone some time to go get some coffee, maybe some lunch, hop on in. You will see two things at the top of your screen. We are recording this, but we are a group that doesn't mind the language. So if you are going to say the word shit, that's okay, because we are sort of in a weird phase right now. We are also, you will see something that says live on otter.ai live notes. We are live closed captioning today's session, so that those who want to read the words or are hard of hearing can also be interactive in what we are doing. A few housekeeping rules. I will be doing the back of house admitting for everybody. We are muting everyone upon entering the Zoom, and currently the only people allowed to speak are Representative Tomiko Santos, Senator Wellman, our moderator, and our parent advocate. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will be putting those questions to our honored guests. Also, as well, we are and we will be centering the voices of communities of color, Black, Indigenous, and other folks of color. So please, if you find yourself as a white ally taking up a lot of airspace, please consider allowing for our families to have this time to ask questions around inequities in education, especially around the time of COVID. Thank you, and I will, we will get started here in about a minute. Okay, we're gonna get started here. I wanna My name is Sharon Navas. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Equity and Education Coalition. I want to say thank you to Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos, who is the chair of the House Education Committee, for being here. Thank you very much for being here. We're honored that you are able to join us today. I also want to say thank you to Senator Lisa Wellman, who is the chair of the Education Committee in the Senate. Thank you as well for being here. We have also a parent who who's going to be joining us, and I'm just waiting for her to log in. But we have some questions. Again, a couple of housekeeping issues. We are recording this. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for those folks who could not make it today. And also we are closed caption live screening what is being said. And lastly, please remember to center the voices of communities of color, our families of color, parents and students of color, as we're having this conversation today. I will be doing the back of house administrative work, and I will now pass it over to our communications manager, who's also going to be moderating today's conversation. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I will be administering those questions. Thank you very much. Renika? Just 1 second as Renika goes on unmute.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. I don't know, I think that Rep. Santos said she was having the same issue with being able to unmute, but I am good now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renika. I work communications for the Equity Education Coalition, and I will be your moderator today. First off, I would like to give the opportunity for our panelists to introduce themselves, and I will start with Representative Santos.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me. Again, my name is Sharon Tomiko Santos. I serve as the state representative from the 37th Legislative District, so from Madison in Seattle through the Rainier Valley, the International District Pioneer Square, to Beacon Hill, Rainier Beach, and downtown Renton. I serve, as was noted, as the chair of the House Education Committee. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Am I supposed to introduce myself? I don't know. Renika, are you there?
Sorry, I was having an issue with unmuting again.
Okay.
But Phil, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. This is Senator Lisa Wellman. I represent the 41st Legislative District. That is Mercer Island, parts of Bellevue, Renton, Newcastle, Issaquah, Sammamish, Beaux-Arts, etc. I chair in the Senate. We combine our early learning and K through 12 education. And so I chair the Early Learning K through 12 Education Committee and work very closely with Representative Santos on both policy as well as prioritization and an approach to education.
Thank you. And Tita?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So my name is Tita Ross, and I'm with the Khmer community of Seattle, King County. And we pretty much based in White Center, even though we are don't have a community center, but we just lost our place last December because the building that we use got sold. And then pretty much on the South King County, where our community serves. Thank you.
Thank you. So to get started, my first question that I have for all panelists is, what are the impacts of COVID-19 on our students, particularly those from families of color?
Do you want to call on us or do you want us to just speak?
Yeah, just feel free to speak.
Okay. Thank you. And Senator Wellman and I work very closely together, as she indicated, and so we'll probably just finish each other's sentences and thoughts. So, but I think the issue that you raise is one that we are struggling to understand the depth and the breadth of the impact on our communities. What we do know is that we had an abrupt stop in Washington State in March that resulted in a definitive beginning point for learning loss for all students. As the school districts across the state, 295 of them went back under the direction of Superintendent Rakedahl into what he called continuous learning. There was very little direction that was coming from the state. And so the school districts, I think, did the best they could with what they had in the way of direction, and which was, one, to make sure students were fed, and two, to make sure that homework was being distributed the best they could. And three, I think, was to protect the health and the jobs that were associated with our school districts. Normally during the summertime, we would be addressing learning loss for our hard to serve students or students that are not getting adequate time, attention, and resources during the academic year. Clearly this summer, that didn't occur. So my biggest fear is that when we return to school, whatever that looks like in the fall, those who were already furthest from educational justice slid, and that was to be, I suppose, expected. But as we move back into the new academic year without really knowing how to address the multiple gaps that our students, whether they are feeling gaps because of technology needs, and Senator Wellman is an expert in that area, whether they are English language students, whether they are special ed students needing the type of physical, behavioral, and other therapeutic services that actually allow them to focus on their academics. They are really going to be even further away from educational justice, even further than they were before. Senator, I know that you have a lot of knowledge and experience in the area around electronics. I hope that you will speak to those inequities.
Yes, well, certainly I will speak to them. I think one of the things that let me just give a little background of experience that I've had, certainly as a privileged white woman, and Representative Santos and I sit on the EOGOAC committee, and that is really a group that has looked at in education the opportunity gap. But what it has meant for me has really been to come to a realization that I did not have before, that we have institutionalized inequity in everything. And so I'm much more conscious now of rooting it out, understanding that, you know, kind of when I'm looking at something, my lens is very different than it used to be, even though I think I thought of myself as being, you know, kind of liberal and supportive and whatever. My lens is very much, it's there, where is it, and what do we need to do? And so I think that we certainly are seeing, just basically, in terms of the COVID crisis, we are seeing differences in physical health. Where we are seeing outbreaks has generally been, more in communities of color. We've seen the physical impact. I think that the stress for unemployment, because the unemployment numbers, as we've looked at them, have been more significant in communities of color. And of course, when you're talking about education, you're talking about children and the environment in which children find themselves. And it's really challenging to learn when you're stressed, for anybody, children or adults. And so now you have families with unemployment, more significant in families of color. You have the environment that they're in more significantly negative, not just because of stress, but also because connectivity is now the way education is being delivered. And as we see in most of the schools, in fact, I don't know any yet that are going back in even a hybrid version now. So they're going back in terms of online learning. And Representative Santos and I are very excited about mastery-based learning. This is something that we would have been in the transforming our education system over a multi-year system, and all of a sudden we found our system overnight transformed to one which is online. And what that has done, as you all probably know, has really shown where there is significant disparity, because when you're online, what are we talking about? We're talking about devices. Thousands, literally thousands of children did not have devices that they could use. And so in some cases, children continued on the devices that they had been using in schools, because they not only had devices, they had connectivity in the homes, they had high-level connectivity where they could actually be connected to teachers, to support groups, to whatever. And in other cases, no connectivity whatsoever. In other cases, just, connectivity in the community where kids would sit in cars actually connected to hotspots so that they could continue their education. And so you really saw these different levels of ability to connect, ability to have the direct face-to-face with teachers. And we're not even talking about, I'm not talking yet, as Representative Santos talked about, some specific populations of special education and English language learners that have been significantly potentially impacted, especially. So those are things that we're working on. We can go into further how, kind of how we're working on them, and frankly, what will continue to be continue to be the challenges, because it's not like you're going to turn a switch and give everybody what they need. We're working very hard on it, but I fear that we will not have, for some of our communities, we won't have the same environments in their home that other children have. We won't have that connectivity. I was on the Zoom meetings just this morning with teachers up in Ponderay and in the Okanagan and in other parts of the state where it's been really, really challenging. They have to drive at least a half an hour to get any kind of connectivity. So we have had issues from the get-go. As soon as schools closed, we have divided into, kind of different levels of education for our students. And we're very much, I think we're very much aware of them. But what are the solutions and how are we going to redress this is something we're very much working on.
Hi, I just want to add to that connectivity parts, because I think we don't, especially in our Khmer community, where parents, most of the parent doesn't know how to use the technology or have access to computer to check on their children's work, or to help to help their children, or just to be there. They don't even have that, so there's a disconnect with children's. So I think there's a lot of disconnect that too with because the children themselves, I think with this new online learning, I always think that word, that distant learning. so they feel distant, definitely. It's not the same as where they were in the classroom, interact with their classmate, and, raise their hand to, to have that social, personal interaction, the human aspect. So I think that's really hard on them. Especially, I have two teenage boys, and the first thing they tell me is that they have no motivation to learn. And as a parent, that's really hard to hear. And I can imagine some of those parents who already disconnect with their children because of, the language barrier as well. Many of our Khmer parents, they're not as close to their children's, and that's make it really harder, I can imagine. Because I was trying to motivate my son to do, the class assignment and, get up on time, to get on that Zoom meeting with their teacher. And it was really hard. It was a struggle. And so, with that motivation, you can feel that, their energy level is not there. So I'm beginning to see that their mental health, right? Their overall well-being, right? There's no physical education, how do you make them move to, get out there and just, get out of the house, but, they can't even do that, right? So they kind of feel trapped. And as parents, it feels like your hand is tied because there's nothing you can do about that. So I thought, so that's really concerning. And I think most of the parents also afraid that, their kids might, like failing, right? Because they don't have that interaction. They don't have that one-on-one, just the whole human interaction part. And I think that's is a big missing link there. So, I'm concerned, their grade might be slipping, right? And how do we keep track of that? And so you have the technology issues where, for the parents from the parent aspect of things. And then you have the child, well-being is concerned. And I know you guys working on food as well. And so like with, at the Highline District, they have various locations and they move around various locations. But, the transportation to get to the location, to pick up, the lunch or, the food provided. So that's, that's another hardship for the families. And just, I think in our community, we have so much trust in the educational system, to take care, of the kids. And so they, and now it's when everything is up in the air, they feel lost, they don't know how to help their kids. They don't know how to connect with the school. And, and I think the school, always depending on their kids to connect with, with the parents, but that's not always the case. And there's no follow-up, and there's no, I guess, in terms of accountability wise, right? Are the school, is there a program in place, to provide that resources out there? And within our communities, I see there very, almost none. And one of our youth, actually in our program, when we start online, he went and got his Chromebook, take it home, and found out that he doesn't have access to it. He's denied access. And to find out that he got disenrolled back in December, and he didn't even know he got disenrolled. there's no letter sent or anything like that. And so I was trying to, work to, to get him back, on track. And, but there's so many layers into that issue. And it started not just during this COVID, but, 2 years ago, when when especially his first period where the teacher is not supportive and so lost motivation to learn, and then, doesn't want to go to school. And so the attendance, just toning down. And as of beginning of last school year, so he hadn't been to school much, but so I guess he got disenrolled automatically due to his attendance. However, they did talk to his mom, and his mom asked for help, and that was it. There's no follow-up on that. So, and sad part about it is that, the mom live in a trailer, it's flying out. So you have all this issue that that was not addressed prior. And so during this COVID time, to face this kind of issue, and now he's not, able to graduate, right? And another sad part about it is that the whole family was, infected, COVID positive, and so they can't get out, we can't go in, and so you have that disconnect. So it's just so many layers that I see that I don't know where the school comes in with this, and it should have come in, way before that, right? And to find out during this COVID time that this has been, that this happened, it's so it's hard to see our, our community members, our families, going through this during this time. So I think that's why it's very important that, a small grassroots organization like us who really, have that, deep understanding and direct connections with the community, to able to have, resource to, to help them. Because I was, I volunteered my time working full time, in healthcare. So I'm considered essential workers that I have to be there every day myself and to do this, after work and weekends. And so to me this is hard. To
Thank you so much, Tita, for sharing your knowledge on these issues and concerns. To kind of bounce off of everything that you just said, question for Representative Tomiko Santos and Senator Wellman. What type of legislation might you be introducing in 2021 legislative session to address some of these concerns that you both have, as well as the concerns that Tita has addressed?
Would you like to go first, Senator, since I went first last time?
Not necessarily. Well, I could say a few things. And one of the things I think that is so challenging is that I do believe that when you are a parent or community member, you look at education and you see education as a thing. And as someone who, I started off as a kindergarten teacher, but then moved into technology, and that's been my career. So I'm looking at a system that has so many different moving parts as it exists in this state. And so one of the things that I think has been a real challenge, and to specifically to speak to your concerns that we just heard, is that, who makes the decision, who makes which decisions? And so we have a state where Representative Santos and I look at some big policies, and we look at, kind of how that large budget for education goes out there to the extent that we can, kind of tweak it here and move it there and come up with other programs. But we also have a system where we have what's called local control. And local control sometimes works really well because different parts of the states are really very, very different. And so at some point we say, okay, here's the system, but then you implement it locally. In many ways, you have a lot of leeway. Um, Frankly, in a time of crisis as we are in today, sometimes it is extremely frustrating to have oversight over a big picture and to see that at the local level, we're dependent upon what happens to that, at the local level, and whether or not parents were contacted. Typically, I get messages from my constituents who live in my district, and I respond to them and try to deal with things locally. But as far as saying this is what should happen to you or that mother or this community, that's really a local issue. And we do guidance. Sometimes there's guidance that came out, but then it's how is it implemented on a local level. Incredibly frustrating. Is it the way, well, let me just say that as somebody who was CEO of a company, it was a whole lot easier just to say, do it this way. This is the way it's going to go, and make that rule. That's not what we get to do, unfortunately. So it is very frustrating, but we have heard of the challenges, that families face. One of the things that I think both Representative Santos, and I don't want to speak for you, Representative, but that we do feel is that people for so long have accepted that learning takes place in a classroom with a teacher at the front of the room. And in point of fact, any parent here knows that you are probably one of the most impactful, important teachers in your child's life. And so that education, really, learning takes place everywhere, all of those experiences. And, I know that in some cases, parents felt just because of who they are, or just because they felt empowered, they felt that there are things that they could teach their children. I know I was talking to one of our tribes to the north, and because they were cut off from that direct connection with teachers, they had the elders focus on education. This is before, this is last year when we cut it off. And so I was listening to the elders came in and did a lot of focus on their history, the tribal history, on the culture. And it was actually an amazingly positive experience that those children have. But very frankly, in other cases, in other communities, culturally, parents feel, I'm not the person who should be teaching. I have not the value to give to my children because it should be this thing, and I don't know how to do that specific thing. And that's unfortunate that, that we haven't empowered parents and the community to be the teachers as well. And so I just wanted to speak to that briefly, but Representative Santos, I know you have something to say here too.
Well, thank you, Senator. I would like to riff off of Tita's comments, actually, before I get to Renika's question. Thank you, Tita, for sharing those. Those are the kinds of stories that Senator Wellman and I and other members of the Educational Opportunity Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee have been hearing for years. We've recorded it in a commissioned study by the legislature, and that is why we even have an EOG OAC. It's the only statutory committee in the country that is directed to make recommendations that eliminate the opportunity gap for children of color in particular. Now, it is a statutory committee that is directed to make recommendations. It does not have any power to actually do anything. The power resides with a very complex and, as you said, layered structure that includes the Superintendent of Public Instruction, it includes the State Board of Education, it includes the Washington State Legislature, but it also includes 295 school districts, each with their own elected board. And I will tell you that in the largest district in the state of Washington, I cannot tell you how frustrated I am with that school district and their inability to pivot and positively reach out to children of color, children with who may be homeless, children who are English language learners. And those are the ones that keep falling through the gap. I do want to say, though, that for the EOG OAC, there's two things I want to mention about that. One is we have issued, well, we haven't issued it yet. We've been working on a guidance that is supposed to be finalized, I think, next month, if I'm not mistaken, Senator.
Yeah.
That will be going to all of the school districts that specifically lays out strategies and guidance about students of color and students of color with special needs, students who themselves may be non-native English speakers and or have families that are non-native English speakers. So Tita, one of the issues you raised was about the engagement of families and communities and how very important that is. That has been sort of a cornerstone of the EOG OAC since we started. One of the individuals who was involved with our work in the early days, she was originally the very first Washington State Education Ombuds, is now the founder of the Washington Family and Community Engagement Trust. When you talk about training of families and how to negotiate these different structures, I would really encourage you to get in touch with that organization, the Washington Family and Community Engagement Trust. The director's name is Addie Simmons, because that's what they specialize in, is training families and communities, not only to be their own self-advocates, but also to help facilitate the new role that families are finding themselves. And this is all families, of course, but as Senator very clearly laid out, some families feel emboldened to be able to be their children's first teacher, either themselves or they can purchase outside support. I think one of the things that we have to be very worried about as we move into the future of COVID is this notion of these learning pods, which I think are going to further create divisions and inequities in our system. The other thing, though, that I want to just riff on here is, Tita, you talked very passionately and eloquently about the social and emotional needs of our students. And that is so true. We know that they are going through something that no child should go through. It's really unimaginable for us as adults. I just cannot even begin to think how our children are experiencing this. Our counselors, our school counselors, our principals, are all very aware of the need to begin with social emotional learning at the beginning of the school year. I would ask all of you to also recognize that everyone who's involved in the school system, from our teachers to our paras to our bus drivers, our principals, our food workers, they are equally traumatized, because I cannot tell you how many teachers I've talked to who have said, I have lost 3 kids. I lost 3 kids when we went to nothing. I've called, I've written letters, I've emailed. I cannot find my 3 kids. And they do, as the daughter of a teacher, I know teachers see their students as their kids. They're taking this very, very personally. So as a community, I think we also have to extend the compassion and grace that our institutions of learning are also struggling at this time. And so the social emotional learning has to extend to them. They're trying to pivot to an online system. And I will tell you, the teacher colleges do not begin with how do you teach in a remote or distant fashion. All of their training has been for teaching in an in-person, in-classroom situation. Senator Wellman and I know she can speak very passionately about this as well, so I might leave much of it to her, but We know that one of the things that we need to do, so I'm trying to pivot now to what are we going to be doing in the future. What we are doing now and in the future is we are trying to ramp up the professional development and training that those who are already in our schools need to be able to know how to deliver powerful, meaningful instruction in a remote online fashion. If you don't know how to do that, just think about how difficult it is to then transfer all of that. So training, investing in training both now and in the future is going to be very important for our teachers, and it is going to look different. And as Senator Wellman indicated, we're hoping it's going to emphasize learning standards, what children know and can demonstrate that they can do, that they can learn, whether it's at home or whether it's in a school building or whether it's in a park setting. I'm very happy to see so many members of the State Board of Education, including the executive director and at least 2 of the board members on the line with us, because they've been our partners in moving towards mastery-based learning. Let me end with one last thing and just say that we have something that is called the Learning Assistance Program in the state of Washington, and it is designed initially to help those students who are struggling the most. It was birthed by our special education parent advocates, because so much of the special education students' school day was caught up with just therapeutic services and not the academic learning. And so those parents rose up, created the Learning Assistance Program. We also know that as it evolved, that the focus on the struggling student often showed up all of the equity gaps, the racial equity gaps that we have in our system. And so eventually LAP became associated with addressing opportunity gaps, and the measurement was poverty. We know that that is an inaccurate and ridiculous sort of stand-in for addressing and looking at the disaggregated data. My bill is going to allow the school districts to use their LAP dollars freely, provided that they assign their spending based on a needs assessment that they have done of their school and their students, including an examination of what outside resources exist. It is a bill that I've sponsored for several years. I think the benefit of it, and I can't help but say this, we're going into several years of budgets that will be very high in terms of need and very low in terms of resources. You know, we are facing a $9 billion shortfall. So one of the things that I'm offering up as a positive characteristic of this legislation is we're already spending the LAP dollars. So it's not more dollars, it's just giving our districts the freedom to spend it on what they see as the highest priorities.
Okay, I would like to jump in with something that I have seen down in the chat that I think is really, really important. Going forward, what are some of the things we're looking at? And one of the, we've already seen a number of school districts, as they must, give us their plans for what they intend to do going back, how they intend to create, their education program. And so with these, most of the ones that I have seen have been, we are not going to start with open schools. This may start to, moderate as we hear more from the Department of Health for some of our more distant areas where there is very little cases of COVID. Although in all cases, we're going to still need to think in terms of it is worldwide, it is statewide, it is everywhere. So we really need to keep not only our children safe, but our teachers, our staff, and we have to appreciate that teachers live in situations where partners have autoimmune diseases. They may be living with an adult, a parent who is over 65 or 70, et cetera. So we just have to think in terms of safety. But I do want to go into what happens when we have school because we need to have open schools where we have masks and 6 feet social distancing. That is going to be what we need to do going forward until we have vaccines, et cetera. Given that we're going to have these hybrid programs where it will be Monday, Wednesday, the child is in school, Tuesday, Thursday not, and Friday, or maybe it's alternate. Whatever it is, it won't be every day. How are people going to go back to work? So childcare, suddenly childcare, which we've kind of thought of, the general population, I think, thinks of as 0 to 5 years of age, suddenly is 0 to 12 or 13 years of age. And we need to figure out what to do. Now, in many cases, with child care for essential workers, our nonprofits stepped up magnificently. The Boys and Girls Clubs, the Wise, the other organizations throughout the communities have just been amazing. They did it without getting the reimbursements that they needed, and they're they're struggling. You may know from many of your community places, but now they're going to be part of our education system. They're going to be brought in somehow because we need those places for children so that parents can get to work, and they can't be just places to park kids. We don't want that. We do certainly want them to have the connectivity so that children can bring their devices and what have you and be able to do some of the work. But we also want them to have the social emotional supports and perhaps counseling. And so we're looking very closely at how we can support those organizations going forward with budget dollars, because we know that they are now part of our overall system. And we have to assure that they are places that are safe. In other words, the people that there have been background checks and fingerprints and all of those kinds of things, that they are conducted in a safe way, so that there are the things that the Department of Health is saying we must do and have to stop this disease from harming more and more people. And it also has to be a rich environment for learning, where learning can take place. We don't want kids sitting in front of monitors for 5 hours a day. We want them to have experiences of learning and experiences of joy, experiences of movement. We want all of that. And so I think that that's something Representative Santos and I and many others, other organizations as well as others in the legislature, are really looking closely at to see what we can do there. I would also say that there are things that are happening that are really positive and exciting. We've been on a lot of calls where there has been a good deal of professional development, where current teachers are being trained to use technology in teaching and are being trained to do things that make it more exciting, not only to use the resources that are available, but also to create their own resources. So we are building up I call it, because I'm a techie, a digital asset management system. So there are these digital assets. In other words, there are teachers who are teaching whatever math in Spanish, and those are being recorded, and that those teachers are plugging them in, and that will be available as additional resources to our kids. And there are cultural lessons and lessons from different ethnicities being recorded, and that will be part of the resources that will be available. So we're working on making sure that happens. But I just want to get back. We're looking at making connectivity available. We're looking at making connectivity appropriate. In other words, in some cases, as far as the federal government is concerned, if you have a little bit of connectivity, you're good to go. That's not good. That's not what we need. We need to be able to have every child everywhere have this kind of experience where I can see you, you can see me, we can talk to one another. we can make that connection. It's not what we would, it's not everything that we would want, but it's significant. And so we need to have that. We need to have everybody in the home, not just one person online at a time. We need to have people be able to pay for that or get what they need at a price that they can afford. And in many cases, it's much, much too expensive for a family to afford to have that connectivity in the home. So we're looking at that. I think I've touched on most everything that we want to, but I'll go back to some, and perhaps we can take some questions, because I don't want to run out of time without having people be able to put their questions out there.
Thank you. So yes, we do have quite a few questions left. I do want to make sure I take a few from the chat. So as we're talking about technology, I might combine these couple. So we have the current funding system funds technology at $138 per student. It's the same regardless of poverty level or the need level, such as ELL status and homelessness in the school. This funding system is not adequate and not equitable. How will the legislature change this to make funding equitable?
Shall I jump in on this one?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, I think that we recognize that connectivity has a number of different parts. One part are devices, making sure that every child on a one-to-one basis has a device. Number two is connecting that wherever that child is, that they're in an environment where they can be connected in a rich environment. And so we recognize that parents don't necessarily have the wherewithal to support that in the home. Finding a way to make that happen, in the home so that that can happen, or whether the child is in, as I said, in some kind of a child care facility, a nonprofit, or even, or whatever. So, I mean, we're looking at all of those, recognizing that the amount that we were talking about is nowhere near reality for what we need. And while I've been involved, I will tell you, in broadband for 12 years or more now, it was because of economic development. Now it's because this is the way education is going out there. And so I am utilizing our state's constitution. I can tell you to say this is our paramount duty. If this is the way education is delivered, we must make sure that it's equitable, that everybody has an equal opportunity to engage.
And I will always defer to the senator on her knowledge and expertise on things that are technical and technological, because that's not my area. Talk to me about numbers and budgets. But the one thing I will add to the senator's remarks is it's not just this is the way that we are delivering education. It is the way that we are doing business these days. How many of you are only on Zoom? It is the way we are delivering medicine these days with the rise in telemedicine. It is the way that we are socializing with friends from faraway places that, normally we wouldn't think about socializing online, but now that's the norm. And so my point is that this is a multifunctional fundamental structural need that we have, and the cost is going to be enormous, far more than the state alone can carry the burden. And this is something where, again, we need our partners in the federal government to also make sure that there is adequate funding for the states to be able to serve all of our communities. The last thing I will say is the senator talked about the devices, the senator talked about the connectivity, and the other piece that I will just emphasize is we can have both the underlying infrastructure, let's call it the highway, because I have to think of it in other terms, I get lost in the internet. So let's talk about it as the highway, and your devices are your vehicles. You don't get on the freeway without learning how to drive. And so the training the training for all of the users, whether it is the teacher, whether it is the student, or whether it's the family. That's another very critical piece. And that's about all I can say about technology.
Thank you.
I just want to add something to that. I think
Oh, yes, please.
Talking about the environment, the space, right? So, some of our, especially in a multi-family household, in our community of colors, so you have a lot of, space is limited. And so having the Wi-Fi hotspot that is available, that is not available now, for the kids to, carry their, Chromebook outside, to do, not inside the home. And so that's another thing that we looked at in terms of like, how does technology help enhance their learning and yet providing, adequate technology, and not have to be limited, to where they at. So I just want to mention about that the need for the Wi-Fi hotspot and the training, especially as well too.
Thank
And
you.
of course,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
one of the things that's, Tita, one of the things that's really exciting to me is, even in my district, I have over 100 languages, so many, many different cultures that, that we're supporting in this district as well as across the state. And so with access to technology, the ability to see things in different languages, because as if you've been on a website, frequently you can choose what language you wish to view the information, which is really very exciting, I think. So there are things that are exciting to me because I'm looking at a 21st century economy. And I think all of us want our children, for me it's my grandchildren, but all of us want them to be able to participate in this economy and to be able to live full, rich lives so that, with money for the things that they want, for homes and the things that they want for their children. And so very frankly, whatever business or whatever they move into going forward, I believe that they're going to have to be digital citizens. They are going to have digital literacy. They're going to be using cell phones. They're going to be using technology because it's part of the economy of today. And so I want all of our kids to feel comfortable with that, and including their parents, as we go forward. So we're working with the teachers to give them the tools that they need, not as much as I would like. We're working communities, hopefully, and certainly it's our recommendation, that the local communities reach out to the parents and engage with the parents and open those doors to communication and make them feel comfortable, even though it's really a challenge when you have people walking into this is before COVID, but walking into a school situation in 100 different languages, to make them feel comfortable to be able to say hello, even in whatever language that parent, has. But we have to work on those things. We have to recognize that they exist and they're barriers to the relationship building, which is going to be so important. And we have to work to overcome them. And now more than ever in terms of COVID, but we're using this opportunity. We need to use this opportunity. If we can't use this challenge, which is, to me, I've used the expression, it's like a world war. It is infecting every person, every child, every adult, every business, every country across the world. And so it's not a good thing. I mean, it's challenging to everybody. And I've got to believe that we can use these crises that we're in to come out of this better than before. I mean, I think that we need to set those goals and say, how can we use this to restructure so that we are addressing those disparities, those inequities that are out there? How can we use this to change our education system to one that really celebrates learning everywhere and recognizes everywhere One of the things that we heard about, which we were really excited to hear, was students down in Camas, I think it was. When this started, the students got together and they used their technology, that they had been using in school. They got together and they created, it wasn't a business because they gave it away, it was a nonprofit business, but they created face shields for first line workers, for essential workers, so that they would be protected. Now that was collaboration. They got together and they collaborated. They learned something about civics, about being part of a community and giving back to a community. They learned about the math and the programming to get those 3D printers to work to create the products that they wanted to create. That's what we're talking about. That's the kind of thing. But we have to recognize, and they have to internalize, look what I learned. And they have to be recognized for having learned it. And so that's how we're building the system. And I think it's going to be really significant. I'm excited about it.
Thank you. So a lot of us on this call are very aware, that there were and currently are a ton of different communities that were kind of left out of these conversations, of these resources, and didn't get as much attention as, let's say, like large metropolitan schools. I first wanted to ask Tita, how do parents that with whom you work with who are non-English speaking get support from the school system?
From the information I gather, very little. So that's where it's my concern too, because not only outreach work been done, I feel, by the school system. I mean, I'm as a parent, try to navigate the school system and understand the information is already hard, and so imagine those who are very low literacy and limited English. They don't even know what to ask. Needless to say, they like I said, they trust the system, to take care of the kids, and many of our community have gone through so much, right? With the historical trauma and recurrent trauma that we're conditioned not to question authority, and so which is sad because we need to advocate for our kids, but we don't know how. They don't know how, and so I think it's very important that we get resourced directly to the community that really understand. I mean, our community members that really understand and can reach out to those families. So that's where I see especially in our Khmer community. I mean, very little outreach. Since we're doing this direct service during this COVID time, we see a lot of issue arise, and it's hard because our children is the one that's gonna bear the burden of the outcome, right? Because they don't have the parents who understand and advocate for them, and yet they can't advocate for themselves. If the school is not there for them, it's a lose-lose situation altogether. And like I said, as parents myself, it's really hard to see other kids in our community struggling, going through struggling with their own family, struggling with the school, and and trying to find resource to help them. And if the school is not there for them, and falling through the crack, they're and I grew up without parents, and so I was really fortunate to have wonderful friends and wonderful teachers. So I know the importance of the teacher's role, and sometimes, they may be under pressure, and not given the right tools, by the district, right? And so their hand is somewhat tied to that. So I hope, looking at during this time, especially coming this fall, I feel like we need some flexibility, right? On all sides, for the teacher to be more creative, and not strict to the curriculum set by the district, and just, have more, interaction connections with, able to have with the students, right? Provide more, maybe, small, creating small group studies, providing more one-on-one sessions, or mentoring programs available. So I don't see that, especially in student of colors, to, I guess, I don't see that much outreach, and provide that, to see that resource. I'm sure it's out there, but when we don't know how do we, we don't know what to ask and who to go to, and so it's just, it's a struggle, for community college, especially parents who, like I said, who don't know how to navigate the system and seek the help that they navigate. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And to add on to that, how can community-based organizations such as ourselves and other grassroots organizations work with school districts and elected officials to address these concerns so that parents and families that you work with can stay supported during COVID?
So what I'd like to see, I think, if there's investment in our community, especially in our grassroots smaller communities, who really in the heart of the community, that have really deep understanding of the issues. I think that's because we're doing the direct service, right? We're relating the informations, and we can advocate, for both our, our students and, and the parents. So we're in the middle, but we're somehow get overlooked in that sense. And for us not to even have a space is even worse, because there's so having a space, I think, for whether there's tutoring programs or, youth programs that help build, their confidence, and having a training site, for, for our members, our parents, especially with the technology. And I mean, if we're investing, because that's important, if we're going to go through here, through the, this is the new normal. So providing the technology to help, better our community, better connections. And more importantly, I think investing in our grassroots communities is also building that trust, building trusting relationships, right? So that way we're able to focus more on the issue and make the big impact. Because right now, I mean, our community's been around for a long time, and we're still so fragmented, and very little outreach work to our community to really understand, what's available out there, and to help themselves, help the children's. And I truly believe that education is the only way to overcome poverty, right? It doesn't matter how we get it. Like Senator Wellman said, it comes on all walks of life, how we educate and learn. But that's, investing in our communities, and connecting, and able to connect with all the resources, and with the, partner with the school districts and the legislature to know that, this is what our community needs to grow, and I think that's important, and invest in our youth, right? Investing in our children's, because they're the one that's gonna help better the community, and better the family, to overcome poverty. But we need that opportunity, and without that missing link, we're still gonna fall behind. So thank you.
Shall I?
Yes.
Thank you, Tita, for that. I think there's a couple of things that I would like to offer in response, and I know that we've gone over time, but I'm going to ask all of you to help with this. One thing, we'll start with this. Whenever you hear anybody talk about all children, correct them. We are not talking about all children. We are talking about each and every child, because all of the previous generations of policies and educational strategies that focus on all children do not get to the individual needs of each and every child. So that's the first thing I'm going to ask you all to do, is correct people when they talk about all children. It's not about all children. It is about each and every child. And in the state of Washington, it is each and every child's constitutional right to the opportunity of basic education. I want to talk about what does this mean now and today. We are moving. We have the opportunity to move. Our senator here is very fond of talking about not wasting an opportunity, and we are not going to waste this opportunity to move from a 19th century construct. Make no mistake, we're still using the construct that was established when we started providing public education, to a 21st century construct, which should be much more malleable, much more flexible, much more targeted, and much more dynamic. And one of the characteristics about a dynamic 21st century educational system is that it's not just about the educators in the classroom and in the schoolhouse. A dynamic 21st century schema recognizes that the people who are experts in education, who are going to be guiding our education, are indeed in the classroom and in the schoolhouse. But the content is filled by, first and foremost, our families and our communities, where there is that expert wealth. The story that Senator Wellman spoke of with the meeting with the tribal leaders is so rich, and it is the type of education that respects the dignity, the identity, and the heritage of each and every student. So it also does need to include the broader community of our businesses, our industry, where our students are going to move into at some time and become the adults in our society. I think it's very important that in this sort of challenging time that we're going to choose to call an opportunity, one of the things that really is a gift is the Black Lives Matter focus. That finally we have people all across the country who are becoming woke to what it means to be a person of color, but especially for our Black brothers and sisters. We have to start with them first, because all of the challenges that the rest of us experience are because of the challenges that have been experienced by our Black and Indigenous peoples. So there are three things that I'm going to talk about with respect to that. Is one, you're seeing change. People are finally, institutions are finally focusing on equity in a way that I've been pounding on the door forever. They are finally at least waking up. They're still white run largely. They're still rooted in their white sort of institutional ways, but that's where we can all help. This group can help. I want to acknowledge that we have both the Association of Washington School Principals as well as the Washington State School Directors Association on the line. And I would encourage all of you to find out what are they doing, because they are working towards making sure that we have principals and school directors who are much more familiar and comfortable in this area of equity than ever before. And so I want to thank them both for being on the line, but also for what they're doing. The second thing I'm going to say is you can all participate in our EOG OAC meetings. They are open public meetings. We take input from the community, and I will say that our next forum is going to focus solely on family and community engagement. We need to hear from you. We hope that you will join us. If you have questions about when, where, how, please just type in EOG OAC into your web browser. You will come up with the website, and you will be able to find out how to connect to our Family and Community Engagement Community Forum. The last thing I'm going to end on is you should know more about the Integrated Student Supports, or the Washington State Integrated Student Support Protocol. I can't go into all of the details, but it was what I was talking about with the LAP dollars. In order for the LAP dollars to be much more flexible, we are going to call on districts and principals, district superintendents and principals, to use the funds in accordance with the WISP. That calls for, first of all, a needs assessment, but second of all, an inventory of what are the existing resources in the communities. That would include the resources of families, and to incorporate those resources into how they're going to meet what they find on the needs assessment. It is our desire and our hope that family and communities are critically engaged. I think it's actually a mandate in the WISP. And they are going to have to keep track of the decisions that they make around the LAP dollars, so that we as taxpaying public will be able to see movement in those students who are and have been for generations in the gap. So I ask you to keep an eye out for that legislation, but also try and familiarize yourself with the Integrated Student Support Protocol, and how we're hoping that that also results in greater use of the multi-tiered MTSS, something, system of supports. So, thank you.
I'd like to just add a little bit, if I may. I think that it's really important to understand that as a nation, as a state, as individuals, we went from one thing to another so quickly. So a state, the state that we were in mentally and physically disappeared overnight. And I think that there were a lot of cases and places where these amazing stories were told that were positive, and then there were a lot of things that we heard that were depressing, distressing, concerning, and as people reacted. I think that we are working very hard, as are others. There are many. And you are part of that. It's not, we're going to do it. No, it's not, we're going to do it. This organization's going to do it, or that organization. We're all going to work together to get this done. And we're all going to play different parts. When it came about and we had our first presentation from the Department of Health, I can tell you that I was kind of surprised, because we talk so much about, you know, when the big one comes and we have that big earthquake and this is what we'll do. I thought for sure that we were going to pull the plan out of the cabinet and say, here we are, here's what we have to do. We got it all locked and loaded. We thought it all through. It didn't happen. It was really clear that we were flying by the seat of our pants, and some flew better than others, very frankly. But now we have a lot of this input. We have a lot of, we've seen what has happened. We know the things that really, many of the things, not all, but many of the things that have to be changed and worked on and corrected and supported. And so to that extent, I think that we're looking at the plans that come forward. We're looking at them in terms of equity, with different lenses, and to make sure that each and every kid gets the best that we can possibly give them. But I also want to say, while I want everybody here fighting for all of that, I also want us to give each other space and grace. It's hard. It is hard. And I know the people that I am working with, you know, working hand in hand with Representative Santos. You know, I have a partner that I feel, you know, just is there with me every step of the way. But there are just so many challenges, and some of the challenges are institutional, just all the complexities of a system. We are working on it. We want your help. We can work together, and I know we can come out of this with a better Washington, with better things for your kids than even we had before. But you're part of it, and don't stop being part of it. And I was looking at the chats. If you want to make another session, you know, in a month from now, or a couple of weeks from now, whatever, if you want to continue this discussion, I'm up for it. And I hope, I know Representative Santos would be as well. So
we got you on record now.
No, I'm here. I don't have to dress below the waist. I don't have to get in a car and go through traffic. There's some positives here. So thank you for letting us, you know, participate, and for giving us all this input. And I know that there's more. I know that there's more that we're going to be able to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Wellman and Representative Tomiko Santos, as well as Tito, for being on this call and answering all of these big, heavy questions. And I know that we were not able to get to everyone's question. I do apologize for that. This definitely showed me, and probably the whole team, that I bet we will definitely have a part 2 of this conversation, because it is a huge conversation, and it's almost during this time a conversation that just it's never ending, and not in a bad way, just we're still in this, and this conversation will always need to happen until everyone receives the resources that they need, until we are out of this pandemic. So on behalf of the EEC, we appreciate y'all being able to hop on this call and answer all these questions. And to folks whose questions didn't get answered, please hold on to those questions, and we hope to have them answered very soon in the future. We do have another Lunch and Learn coming up on August 19th, I believe, on being Black in the classroom, and that will go through a lot of some of these similar topics, but I know we will also touch on a lot of racial justice issues and inequalities that are going on right now, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. Sharon, anything to add?
No. So Representative Santos, Tomiko Santos, had put out some amazing information. All of that is in the chat, including the link to the EOGOAC, the link to the Washington Family Leadership Program, the link to the Learning Assistance Program, as well as some other links that she and Senators Wellman and Tita had put out. We will be uploading this to our YouTube. The chat and the links will be available for all of you. Look forward to seeing all of you again in 2 weeks when we have a discussion with Black educators about Black Lives Matter in the classroom. Thank you so much. Again, we're honored to have Representative Tomiko Santos, Senator Wellman, and Tita here to really let us know what is going on in their world, but also how can we all work together to ensure that each and every Black, Brown, Indigenous child and student of color gets the most excellent education regardless of zip code and ability and socioeconomic status. We know that the educational system has to start working for our kids. And if that means we need to start revolutionizing our educational system, I am absolutely sure that with the leadership of Representative Tomiko Santos and Senator Wellman, as well as everybody else on the call, we will get an educational system that works for our kids. So thank you again, and we welcome the invitation to go to the EOGOAC meetings. And again, look forward to talking to all of you soon, and have a great day.
Sure. Can I add one quick thing before we get off the call?
Yes.
So more of just a comment, something that Samet, who's part of our EEC team, had put into the chat was, as we're talking about digital equity and hotspots and Wi-Fi, we had a couple of us had went around to different libraries within just the King County area, so like Kent, Aquila, White Center, etc. And I know that we and families and communities were told that the libraries would have hotspots for students to be able to go and do work. But when we tested about 10 different libraries, there was no Wi-Fi connection available of any kind, even the library's Wi-Fi. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
We're mapping everywhere in the state, every individual home that doesn't have connectivity. Please send it to my attention, and very much interested if you have kids in your area. We don't need their names, but we do need an address.
Great.
Thank you so much.
If you're going to a library and you don't have Wi-Fi there, please drop us a note on Twitter, Facebook, or email, and we will get that information to the appropriate places. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day, and we'll stay united in the fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.